Hi, John. How are you doing? Welcome to
I'm fine,
Freshly
sir. How are
Pressed.
you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to Freshly Pressed. Another episode of Freshly Pressed is here today.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. I gather that you have a campaign running, Alma, on Kickstarter. I would want you to start with talking about it for first 2 minutes.
Okay, yeah, it's basically the tagline for the book is "What if Buffy was a 72-year-old grandmother?" Uh, I printed up about 100 copies before the convention season and sold through them pretty quick. Everybody that's seen it and that I talked to seemed to like it. So it's up on Kickstarter right now. We're struggling a little bit. It's not start. I'm about 6 days in, I think, and it hasn't did all that. Hasn't jumped out like I was hoping it was, but still got about 20 something days left. So I'm not giving up yet. It's my first Kickstarter, so it's a learning process. Hopefully we'll get this one funded. If not, I'm going to take a little break and then figure out what I did wrong, and then we'll come back and get it funded because Alma, I've already got 3 issues of the script written, half of the
Whoa.
second issue drawn. So I just need to get the Kickstarter so I can start making some money so I can pay the artist and the printing costs and things like that. So almost, I can see Alma lasting for quite a while. I've got a lot of ideas for it. Got a lot more new characters being introduced as we go along. So once I think, and I'm actually talking to a publisher right now. I met him at a convention and we talked, and they wanted to look at it. So, if really lucky, maybe it'll, someone will pick it up and help fund it. If not, I plan to, continue to self-publish it. But either way, it's going to come out one way or the other. It may just be a little
It,
slower if I do it myself.
no, I think it deserves to be read by a lot of people because I've read it a few times myself and I absolutely love it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. It was a very, I enjoyed it. It was one of the things I liked writing a lot. So I'm hoping, it's going to, like I said, it's going to continue one way or the other. It just may be a little slower process if I have to self-pub, fund it each issue. But we've got a plan for it. Hernan, the artist, has done such an amazing job with it. He likes it. He's in for it. In the Kickstarter comic, we actually, besides the 24-page story that was in the regular issue, we did an 8-page story too. So we've got a lot
Wow.
of extras in that Kickstarter comic too. So to make it worth it, it's gonna, instead of 24 pages, it's gonna be probably about 44 pages. So it's gonna be a pretty good sized comic.
That's amazing. I think that's a good size for somebody to like if you are ordering a physical copy on Kickstarter to make it worth their while, like that all that shipping cost and everything. It
Yeah, and that
is
was
like
my
for
worry is because a Kickstarter, you can't really, 24 pages when you charge $15 for it feels like that's not enough, pages in it. But you can't charge much less than that because on a Kickstarter you'll end up losing all your money. So I wanted to make sure that I had enough stuff in it that made it worthwhile for somebody to pick up. So like I said, it's going to have pinups. It's got an extra 8-page story. It's got a letter page we're going to have in it, and I've got a section in there with a cookbook from Alma. So
oh,
we got a lot in there. So I think it's going to definitely be worth the price of the comic.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I think some of those grandma's recipes are going
Yeah,
are
yeah.
going to be sweet. That's so awesome. Yeah, I think you can do a lot with this character. Not just this character, the world itself is so rich. I think you can get super creative, like you already have. Like obviously, when the book starts, there's this character of a champion, and she like you introduce so many monsters and
Oh, yeah.
creative things, like a
And
flying
I think
shark.
it's given a look that you don't really see older people in comics too much. Usually if you see them, they're like Aunt May or people like in the background. But this is moving the older people kind of forward. Giving them they're the main characters. We're kind of looking. I'm besides the monsters and everything else. It's going to look at some of the problems like that. Like the second issue deals a lot with Alma's remembering the death of her husband, that type of stuff, just the loss of her husband. So I'm trying to mix in some, serious issues along with the monsters and everything else.
And also, I think Tyrone is hilarious. I,
Yeah.
I love that there are moments of levity despite being, like
Oh yeah.
yeah. I really like that it has lighter moments and also serious ones, and then there's some like out and out action moments that are like really good and badass. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank
it
you.
has a
Yeah.
good
I
mix.
can't anything I write, I've got to throw some humor and some comedy in, or some absurd moments. It's, just it'd be boring, or it just wouldn't be. I don't think it'd be as good a book or as good a story if it was all just completely serious. Because, nobody's life is all serious. There's always some funny parts or some weird parts in it. So
Yeah, yeah. I think we are also very lucky because we are writing comics and not movies, because movies are supposed to stick with genre a bit more
yeah,
than comics themselves. Comics are they're so widely creative and people expect them to be so. So we can just throw in a lot of stuff in the mixer and blend it, and
yeah,
then people
definitely.
would, yeah. Very, very true. So how did you get the idea for Alma? Uh, what was the thought process behind it when you started writing it for the first time?
It was a couple ideas. The initial idea was from I don't even remember what group it was in, but it was a group on Facebook, and somebody had made a post about, what would happen if, instead of, the young uh hero that gets to power, like, Buffy, and, gets to power, or like a lot of fantasy stories, it's always the young villager, that the wizard gives the power to go save the world, or the princess. Somebody made a comment, was like, well, what would happen if somebody's grandma got the power? And the rest of the post was basically joking. Everybody was taking it, kind of funny, but I read it and my mind went a completely different direction. It was like very serious. It was like, wait a minute, that's a cool idea. So, I started thinking about it, and working on it. And then I kind of, started, once I decided on the name, which I named it after my mom's name is Alma. And, that
Wow.
kind of just gave me some more to kind of work a little of my mom's life and my, into the comic too, and just kind of combine the two. My mom doesn't go fight monsters and demons, but she's also like, probably one of the strongest people I know. When she was in her 80s, she's 87 now, and her age is finally starting to kind of catch up with her. But even when she was in her 80s, she was out there like washing her home, or out there, with a machete cutting down branches, and she worked harder than I did, and she's a lot older than I am. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even be able to keep up with her. Even now, she still won't stop, and it's a lot harder for her, but she just doesn't give up. And so I wanted that type of attitude with this character.
Absolutely. Well, she doesn't fight real monsters, but she does fight metaphorical monsters, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, so how did you first get into comics, like just writing them, and like what's your like how was it growing up, and what influenced
That
you?
was pretty much, I can't remember when I started to read. If I look back, I can remember reading all my life. My dad was always a big reader. Even when I was like probably 5 or 6 years old, I think they put me into they joined me up with a book club, like a Dr. Zeus book club or something, because I remember getting Dr. Zeus books every month or something. And then from there, I just kept reading, and my parents were really good that they never like censored my readership, or they never put any like they never told me, oh, you're old enough for this, that's out there, that's too adult for you to read. When I was in like sixth grade, they were giving us all these exams to kind of measure where we were. A lot of subjects, math, I'm terrible about. I probably was in like second grade level math. But they, when I was in sixth grade, they said I was reading at like a college age level. And that's mainly, due to my parents just letting me read what I wanted to do. I was reading stuff that a lot of parents would probably look at and, have a fit, because it's like, it's an adult, it's adult, a book. I was
Yep.
reading Harlan Ellison when I was 12 years old. And and he's got some pretty, adult, themes and stuff in it. But and you know, and I've always wanted to read. And then as I was going on reading, I started reading comic books. You know, I was reading comics from that early age too, and I just, you know, I've always, you know, I read so much it fascinated me. And then from some writers like Isaac Asimov and Harlan Ellison, who, you know, Harlan Ellison writes a lot of short stories, but he writes a lot of introductions and stuff around his stories, talking about writing and you know, his life. And Asimov did that too, and it kind of gave me like that behind the door scene at writing and being a writer, and it just was something that I wanted to do. So I started trying to write comics, and you know, from probably before I even got out of school. And once I got out of school, I just kept writing and writing, and you know, I'd send them out, and get a million rejections. And I was sending out short stories and getting, you know, rejections back. But I would, you know, as soon as I'd write something, I'd send it out. I'd start something new. So when the rejection came back,
Yep.
you know, yeah, it hurt, but it wasn't that bad because I was already onto another story, you know, and I
Yeah.
just kept going
Yeah.
until I got my first work in comics was published in, I think it was the same time. It was the back of Bill Loeb's Journey, which was a black and white comic that was published by Aardvark Anaheim. I did a 5-page story with Sam Keith, and I got a short story published in Fantagraphics Critters Anthology. They came out the same month. So those were the first two things that I've published. And you know, through the 70s and to the mainly to the 80s and 90s, I was published in a lot of the, you know, indies like Kitchen Sink and Innovation and different companies like that. And then, you know, kind of the end of the 90s, I think it was, or maybe it was even the 2000, you know, early 2000s, I kind of took a break, you know, and I never stopped reading, but I kind of stopped writing for a little bit. And then when I came back writing, it's been more self-published. But even now, I'm still working with. I had a comic published by It's Alive, and I'm working with Antarctica Press. I've got a few things coming out through them in the
Nice.
future. And like I said, I'm talking with another publisher about Alma. You know, which it's way too early to say, you know, which way it's going to go. But you know, I'm either, you know, I like self-publishing, but I'm not above you know, working with a publisher. You know, one, that takes a lot of the financial problems off of it. You know, they pay for the
That's
printing
true.
like that, and plus they have a longer reach. You know, my problem right now is most of my comics, most people that have seen them are local people that I see at conventions. You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
do some mail orders, but not a lot. So, you know, most of what I sell has been at conventions, and most of that has been within like the New Orleans area. So far this year, I'm branching out. I'm going a lot further. Uh, you know, like around Louisiana, like I'm going into Florida, Tennessee, Texas to try to do some more conventions and you know, to spread the word out too. Because I've did so many local conventions. It's like people come up and say, "You got anything new?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't got anything done since the last convention."
Absolutely. I think if you had like if you saved up enough money to maybe go to like Baltimore conference, or you know, like Baltimore Comic Con is actually quite big for
Oh, really?
indie writers. Yeah, yeah. There's
Oh,
so many indie writers that actually make a killing there. And even like the one that Chicago, the Midwest one, and there's a big one in obviously New York is the biggest one, right?
yeah. I've been to
And
Chicago.
San
I've been to
Diego.
San Diego and Chicago back in the day, but it's been a while since I went to either of those. So it's, you know, I went to San Diego and actually got to be at a, you know, there's a comic book store from Texas that had basically rented like a whole big corner end cap at San Diego, and they invited
Wow.
all these indie writers and artists, and we all had our time at the table. Like, you know, like one day I had 2 or 3 hours that I sat at the table and was able to, you know, so that was kind of cool, you know. And I'd like to go back to San Diego again, but it's, you know, all those big conventions are expensive, and then just getting the product to them too. It's like, you know, getting my books out there to sell. That's a, you know, that's a long drive or a long, you
I
know, a
know.
haul.
I know, I know. Especially, I would love to get your books to Australia, you know, like you'll sell them here because I know the person who actually bought your books on our site
Oh,
was
okay.
from Sydney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he loved your books. So I'm
That's
sure you
great.
have an audience here.
Yeah. Hold on just a minute. Get away from them.
Oh, you should bring her on the call.
I'm sorry. She's over there eating my books. age where she's teething, so she wants to chew on everything. I got, and my house is full of books and books on comics and all sorts of books, and I can't pick everything up off that's within her reach because I want to have space.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I have to be careful and watch what she's doing.
yeah. But having a companion around like a dog is such a
Oh yeah,
good thing, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a dog most of my life, and my last dog, Buffy, which shows you how much I like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She passed away about maybe 5 6 years ago, and I kind of took a break, and I figured it was about time to try to get a new one. So, but it made me forget how exhausting and how hard it is with a puppy.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Was it Robot Sex where you wrote a eulogy for her, for Buffy?
Hmm?
Or one of the books where you actually wrote
Yeah, a girl and her
yeah,
dog.
a girl
Yeah,
and a dog. Yeah, that was
yeah,
the
girl
one.
and her dog. A
Yeah.
lot of that was based. It was based. It's the initial idea for that came from when I had a friend that her dog had just passed away,
Yeah.
and that started me thinking, and it made me start thinking about Buffy too. So Buffy was a lot in that book too. So it got me starting uh, to write, and to do the book.
Yeah. You do. I think I asked you this last time around as well, but you do have a penchant for writing strong female characters. I think all the lead characters in your books are actually strong female characters.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Do you?
try. I've tried to. You know, I won't say. I mean, there's a few probably some male characters, but it's I wanted to do something that was different. I mean, there's a million straight white male characters. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot more to the world than that. And
Yes.
I wanted to try to expand that and show that a little bit. So I like to write, some diverse characters. I like, having some of that out there where, it's not all just, white characters just like I am. I mean, there's a lot of it, and then and I'll have some white characters and I'll have some male characters, but that doesn't mean every character I write has to be like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It helps me stretch too, I think, when I write a character that's not just like me. I've got to think outside the box. I have to think a little okay, their worldview, their experiences is not going to be exactly like mine is.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think also your stories are very personal, despite them being about like some fantasy or science fiction setting. They do
Hmm.
feel very personal. Like a lot of them, of course, Girl and a Dog is not a fantasy or science fiction, but a lot of your stories are. But they still like the characters and their traits and how they behave. They seem to draw a lot from your real life. You know.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, Alma, kind of went with my mom and my dad's in that kind of too. I try to, base, work some of that stuff off of things that I know that might have happened to me or happened to friends or something. But, to me, I'm more, a lot of people, some people write comics, more plot driven. I'm more character driven. I want to see what happens to the people. I want to see what the plot makes, affects the people and the characters in the story. So when I sit down to write, I'm more worried about who the character is sometimes than I am what's actually going on. So sometimes I have to think, okay, wait a minute, let me figure out what's actually happening here. I can't just,
Yeah.
I've got to actually have a plot too.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and I think that's what a lot of people also appreciate about your books as well. That's what I like about your books, that they are so character driven. Um, your characters are actually quite relatable. And
Thank you. I try. I think to me that's the most important thing. If you can relate to the people, the characters, even if they're not like you, but if you can, relate to them and they feel human to you, you're going to enjoy the story a lot more than if it's just an exercise in, what happens or something.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Cool. I'll segue a little into the next question. I would say, what are the five most pop culture, more influential pop culture things that influenced your work? Maybe.
Ooh. like I could say, as far as just going from writers and things, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is one. That's
Yeah.
like I said, just the idea of one. I think just having that idea of that character turning everything on its head. Having the blonde cheerleader be the hero of the series, that made me kind of rethink how some of the characters and how some of the stuff I want to do. Where it's not always like we were just talking about, like it's always somebody different. Um, I get Harlan Ellison, who was a science fiction fantasy writer back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I don't know. A lot of people may not have heard of him. Uh, most of his books are out of print right now, but he actually wrote a story called A Boy and His Dog, and it's nothing like what A Girl and His Dog or her dog is about. But the title, when I wrote the story, the title was just too perfect not to use.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's had a lot of influence. Steve Gerber, who
Right.
wrote Howard the Duck and a lot of work for Marvel, like the Defenders and stuff like that.
Yep.
He wrote one, to me, he wrote one of the best Defenders run ever, And I see a lot of his influence because he was one of those writers that he would take a serious, superhero story or something where, the bad guys were doing things, but he would make some of it absurd, and some of it just ridiculous. And it still could come out dramatic too, I mean, even just look at Howard the Duck, some of that work.
Yep.
And that's it. A lot of my work, I always try to throw in that little absurdity or that little, sense of humor or whatever. And a lot of that I think came from Steve Gerber. It's his work was
Nice.
just really good.
Yeah.
I could see Stan Lee. I grew up with Marvel comics. Grew up
Who doesn't
Marvel.
love
Reading,
Stanley?
reading Marvel. And even not even just Stan Lee personally, but a lot of all those writers that came after Stan Lee were so influenced by him. So I got influenced through that too. So all that just affected me. And then Isaac
Nice.
Asimov too, like I was mentioning. He's the guy that wrote Foundation and I,
Oh, I
Robot.
love.
And,
Yeah.
when I was younger, I was a really big science fiction writer. Everything I read was science fiction. And that's for a while that was almost anything I read. And there's a lot of those writers, but Asimov was probably one of the biggest ones that I was really,
Mm,
that I think influenced me. I don't read as much science fiction anymore. Every now and then I'll pick up some, but I'll read a lot more mysteries and thrillers and things like that. But anything, even more recent, like I say recent, but in the last 10, 20 years, Brian Michael Bendis.
right.
He was a
Yeah.
really big influence. The way he writes dialogue, the way his characters talk, a lot of that, made me rethink how, I wanted my characters to talk, because,
Nice.
it's for me, a lot of his characters talk like real people, they talk, and I never got out of comics completely. Like, a lot of people have those stories. Oh, I stopped reading comics for, this time, but I
Yeah.
came close. For one point, I was kind of like, I probably only was reading like maybe half a dozen books at that, like, and they were mostly like little black and white independents like Cerebus. I think I was reading Bone at the time. It might have been still out, a few like that.
Yep.
And then I picked up Michael Bendis's Daredevil when he was writing Daredevil, and that just
Nice.
like floored me. It was like, oh, I
Yeah.
have to. And I started reading every issue of that again, and it got me back into mainstream comics. So I started reading that, and I picked up something else, and because I my taste is very varied. It's not, I like to read, mainstream and, an independent or whatever. Like, oops, sorry about that. Just shook the table. Um, I read like, right now, I think one of my favorite comics is Nightwing, by Tom Taylor.
Oh, I was about to say Nightwing. Tom Taylor and like I think even Chuck Dixon's run in Nightwing
Yeah,
is
I never really read it back in that day. A lot of people I know, every time I mention that, a lot of people bring up Chuck Dixon's Nightwing, and I never really read it at that point. But right now, Tom Taylor's Nightwing is like, to me, is awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Brian Bong's saga. That's
Saga is
some
the
of that
thing that
stuff.
actually got me into Indiecomics in the first place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if that hasn't got a lot of people into indie comics because it's just so good. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, his his characters on that are just awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely love Saga. And this, I think they're restarting Saga now.
It
from what
just
I
the new issue just came back.
came back. Yeah.
The issue, where he took the break. Hold on just a second. All right, I had to put her out. She's tearing everything up. I don't know what gets into her. And she
That's
don't
all right.
usually act like that, except for some reason when I get on these Zoom calls, she starts going crazy.
That's all right.
But
Yeah, I
she'll bark
my
and scratch at the door, so she's good.
one of my favorites I think is has been Jim Lee and Chris Claremont and their whole like early 90s X-Men run.
Yeah,
That's
I was not, I was kind of out of mainstream comics at that point. I didn't read, and X-Men. I read Chris Claremont's X-Men back, was John Byrne and Paul Smith. And then I kind of took that break. And now X-Men is one of the hardest comics, I think, to get back into
oh
because there's so much going on and so much has happened. I mean, there's so many characters that, that I don't know. She just opened the door.
yeah.
But so it's, because I tried to read it when Jonathan Hickman took over. I thought
Yeah.
maybe that would be a good point. But even that was just like I was kind of lost and just I
Yeah.
couldn't really get back into the X-Men. So but I know for a lot of people, that X-Men is like, ground zero for people.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I've spoken to so many creators, all of them they actually started with X-Men, and I don't know, it has such a big gallery of characters that and anyone can actually relate to one of the characters and then go with it, So yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, I read when, X-Men, when John Byrne and Chris Claremont took over. Yeah, I was a big fan at that point. I was reading it all the time.
Yeah,
But one of
yeah.
my favorite John Byrne and Chris Claremont books was their run on Iron Fist. They did Iron
Yeah.
Fist for maybe about a year, and that was one of my favorite comics at the time. I thought that was so good.
Nice. I don't know. I sometimes also feel like Kelly Jones and Doug Monesh, their
Mm-hmm.
run on Batman is so like it's so underrated.
Oh
I
yeah,
feel
yeah,
their work is amazing, but like it doesn't get that much recognition
yeah.
as
I
like
think
say
Kelly
Frank
Jones
Miller.
is very underrated. I think because his style is so unique that a lot of people kind of pass it by, but it's so good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice, nice. Awesome. I would say I would ask you what are the plans for the expansion of the world of Alma in the books to come?
Uh, it's not. Hopefully, if I can just continue each issue, I don't really. I'm not going to, like, spin anything off, or everything will kind of stay in. I've got new characters coming up. The second issue brings back the ghost of her husband, her dead husband. He's going to be, kind of part. I'm kind of creating, like, how Buffy had her little Scooby gang. I'm kind of creating her own Scooby gang, even though in the book she kind of makes a. They mentioned at it, and Tyrone says, there is no Scooby gang. Well, she's
Yeah,
going to kind of create a Scooby gang.
yeah,
The
yeah,
third issue actually introduces her granddaughter, who comes
yeah,
back to live with her, and it kind of gives you the idea that maybe her granddaughter was the person that was supposed to get the power, because she's going to be 15 years old, and she's living with her, that maybe it was a mistake, and instead of her getting Alma got the power, that she's going to end up being, she's not going to get the power, but she's going to end up being one of the monster fighters with her. So I'm creating kind of like a little world, so it's not just going to be Alma. She's going to have her friends and a little group to help her, do the fighting and stuff.
that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's what makes the stories more interesting to read, right? Like have a great set of like side characters, and then you have
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's also very difficult to write side characters and make them as interesting as the main central character, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it can be, yes. Or sometimes you can make them too interesting and forget the main character. So, it's kind of a balancing act. You want them to be real and you want them to be just as, but, you still have the main character. I don't want to lose Alma in the middle of the story and stuff.
That's very true. That's very true. I
Yeah.
think
So, yeah. So hopefully, like I said, I've got plans. I can continue this story for a long time. So, hopefully I'll be able to, keep putting out issues, on some type of basis and stuff and get it out.
And I hope you do, because the world is very rich, and I feel there are so many stories to be told. Who knows? You might think of a spin-off sometime down the
Yeah,
line.
yeah. Well, I've got so many other books that I'm writing too that I don't know if I want to do. I don't really need to do a spinoff. I've still, Robot Sex is already. I've got 2 issues of it out. So hopefully, I'm working on the 3rd issue of that. So that's going to be kind of a continuing story too. So that's originally that was going to be a 1 issue, and done, but the story kind of grew and it's just kind of become a okay. I know where I want to go with it. I want to keep going with it. So I can I want to keep that going. So I've got a few things in the works, some different things. I'm working with a group called Exile Studios,
Right.
and there are a lot of really great other writers and artists, and we're trying to you know when we hit, hopefully this year, we'll have a lot of stuff out. I've got like 2
Nice.
or 3 projects with them right now. We're going to do some webtoon stuff. We're going to do some comic books. We're going to do, we're trying to hit all over and really, kind of make a splash. And there's some
That's
really great
amazing.
artists and writers working in that group too. So that's going to be pretty cool.
That's so awesome. No, I'm so looking forward to reading more of your work, and I hope this Kickstarter campaign goes well. Even if it doesn't, I hope you end up selling a lot of your copies of Alma.
Yeah. Well, even if it, like I said, if it doesn't, this is my first Kickstarter I did, and I can see some things I think that I should have did differently. So I may take a month or two before I retry it. Uh, but I will, Alma will come back on Kickstarter, or there's another crowdfunding site called Zoop,
Yeah,
and I'm already talking with them to crowdfund a different book. We're talking
right.
about probably just about the time Alma ends. This other one should be starting with a month. So
Yep,
I'm
yep.
kind. There's a lot of crowdfunding sites out there. So Kickstarter is the best known and and the biggest, but I want to try a few of them out. Maybe Kickstarter won't do good for me. Maybe Zoop will do good.
Who
Who
knows?
knows? And like I said, I will go back to Kickstarter. I'll take what I've learned from this one. Hopefully I can get it. I spend almost all my days right now online just finding spots to push this. Put
Yeah,
the link
yeah,
up. And you know, maybe it'll hit the right spot where all of a sudden a lot of people will see it and you know it'll get funded. And if not, like I said, it'll be disappointing, but like I said, it's my first one. I'll learn from it. We'll move on. Next one will probably be Zoot. Then I'll do Alma. Maybe bring it back to Kickstarter. Maybe go to Indiegogo with it. There's a lot of different sites I can try it,
yeah.
but you
Absolutely.
know, my plan is to try to keep something out on some crowdfunding service because I just need it to help pay for all this stuff. It's a lot
No,
easier if I can have some help like that to pay the
absolutely.
printing costs and the artists and everything else. I've been funding most of that out of my pocket, but I've actually retired, so I don't have a job right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a little harder to find, and I don't want to reach in my savings that I say that I have to live off of, and because I'll shoot through that really quick, and then I won't have anything to live off of. Next thing you'll see, I'll be on the street with a little bit.
No, no, absolutely. I think crowdfunding is important because it does help you get your projects to life. It gives you enough runway to actually build your product, put it into the market, or pay your artists and things like that. And
Yeah.
then once your product is is ready, then you can obviously go to conventions and things like that. But yeah, Kickstarter does de-risk a lot for you. So, or like
Hmm.
any crowdfunding for that matter, so
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. That's amazing, John. I think just 1 minute, I'll give a shout out to all the listeners, and just point them to the campaign. Uh just take it away. Floor's yours.
All right. Well, the Kickstarter is long. The link for Kickstarter is this long, difficult link, but if you go to Kickstarter and just type in Alma the Champion, it'll come up. So it'll make it easy. We've got a lot of variant covers. I think I've got 5 different variant covers that are really cool looking. I've got a little plush of Tyrone you can pledge with. So there's a few, I think some really cool reward tiers. We've tried to keep the prices within reason, and and the good thing is the book is done. If we get funded, all you're gonna have to do is wait on to get printed and me to pack it up and send it out. So it should get to everybody pretty quick. Plus at least you will be getting the book. Like I said, it's 100% done. Everything, the story, the art, the letter, everything is done in it. So basically, it's just we just have to get it printed because there's a lot of horror stories on Kickstarter about people not getting funded.
Yeah.
That's why I really wanted to make sure this one was 100% and done. So we don't have there wasn't that, especially from somebody new doing a Kickstarter. People don't know me from Adam, and if I went on and said, oh yeah, we're going to do a 40-page comic, but we haven't even started it yet, there might not be quite as much enthusiasm for it. So it's done, ready to go. So I think it's just, if I can get the word out to the right people and get the right people interested in it, hopefully, I think our goal is only 4,500. So we're not asking for a lot, just enough to try to get it printed up, pay for the next issue, and move on from there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think what John said, he hit nail on the head by saying you'll get your reward. A lot of campaigns don't fulfill their rewards properly. Book's ready, you'll get your rewards for sure. It's 100%. And yeah, just go in, push that button, fund the comic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, John. I really appreciate your time today.
You're very welcome. I always enjoy talking with you.
Yeah. Awesome. See you then.
All right. Thank you.